The KHERGIT Khanate is a faction in Karadia ruled by Sanjar Khan, while the claimant to the throne is Dostum Khan. They live in the great steppes of the south in a vast region of dry grassland. There's a harsh winter there and little resources of wood and ore, but the one thing found in abundance here are herds of horses that live both in the wild and domestically. The KHERGITs use this to their advantage, making them the strongest cavalry faction in the game. But what are their strengths and weaknesses? Well, they're entirely mounted troops that are quick to train. They're also pretty cheap. They have superb horse archers with the best strategic maneuverability out of all of the factions. Unfortunately though, they're easily devastated when on the defense or dismounted, or when unable to ride and maneuver. They can be pretty weak when they're trapped in the mountains or in a sieged castle. But let's start going through the troop trees and what can we expect from this faction. Well, of course, starting off with the KHERGIT Tribesmen. These guys are a bit like all other recruits, they're pretty terrible at fighting. Although saying this though, they are armed with a club which makes them susceptible and suitable for capturing enemies for ransom, but then again they are extremely risky putting them into battle since they're so fragile. However though, they are one of the only recruits to actually have range advantages against looters. Some of them actually spawn with bows that can give you quite a bit of an advantage at the start against very weak troops. Saying this though, the KHERGIT Tribesmen are the most well-armoured recruit tier unit, being the only recruits to wear basic armour rather than most of the common peasant clothing that a lot of the other factions recruits wear. But of course you want to get these guys upgraded as fast as possible, and this is why you upgrade them to the KHERGIT Skirmisher. The Skirmishers are upgraded from the Tribesmen and are their second tier unit, and they all spawn with horses. This means that they are a strong cavalry unit at the start, and you can get them pretty much straight away, making them pretty useful against looters. They have bows and some horse archery skill, but their armor and horses are not really that good, and due to their lack of lancers, these units are less useful than otherwise a similar step bandits that can be upgraded very quickly. Even though they have horses though, they aren't very useful except against light infantry. However, you can easily amass them, and a lot of cavalry is always devastating against infantry such as bandits and other light infantry of the such. But once these are upgraded, you're staying on the same tier because the KHERGITs have a very linear upgrade structure. The Skirmishers will be upgraded to the Horsemen. These KHERGIT Horsemen are rather competent at ranged mounted combat. Their bows and quiver augmented with 4 power draw and 3 horse archery make them useful at harassment throughout your game. Since Horsemen don't really have any power strike but a lot of power draw, it may be best for them to hold position with your horse archers on top of a hill, or simply out of the way on level terrain, to rain arrows down upon the enemy while your lancers charge through their lines. There's a very high chance of these guys actually riding with hunters, as well as wielding light lances along with their standard nomad bow and arrows. As a result, the KHERGIT Horsemen are very useful as a general purpose cavalry unit. But this is where the KHERGITs actually start to split off, and out of all the factions, the KHERGITs probably have one of the shortest troop trees. They split off from the Horsemen. You can go one way where you can get the Lancers. These are really heavily powerful and armoured troops. They can either have coursers, which, you know, they are quite fast, and they're pretty much faster than any other 4th tier cavalry unit, but they're also subject to frequent unhorsing, and as we know, when the KHERGITs get unhorsed or dismounted, they can be pretty weak and get devastated pretty easily against other infantry. But some of them also ride heavy step charges into battle. This makes them a lot better for charging down enemies and smacking into them, doing that charge damage. Their lack of bows have been compensated now with a heavier set of melee weapons. If you're trying to compare them to other factions, I'd say they're probably approximately equivalent to the Swadian men-at-arms or the Vega Horsemen. So they're not ultra powerful cavalry, but they're still pretty good. And I mean, their horses, horses are cool. Yeah, screw you, Rhodox. But what about going the other side? Well, if you don't want to go to the Lancers and you want to stay in the more skirmisher area for the KHERGITs, you can go from the Horsemen up to the KHERGIT Horse Archers. But this upgrade path is a little bit unusual, as they actually have the same level and weaker horses than their predecessors, the KHERGIT Horsemen. But to compensate this, they now wield strongbows and some of them even javelins, meaning they have a lot more range skill and you can use them to your advantage, sitting them on top of a hill, but be careful, they don't have too much armor, meaning that if you try and get them into battle, they will be absolutely destroyed. They don't have very strong melee weapons and aren't very powerful, and the horses can die easily. So yes, as I said, put your horse archers on top of a position, rain down arrows at your enemies because they have great accuracy and great bows that they will use very effectively. But what about the top tier for the KHERGITs? Well, this is where they bring in the KHERGIT Veteran Horse Archers. This is the highest tier ranged unit for the KHERGIT Khanate, as well as being the top tier for them overall. They're mounted on coursers, making them extremely mobile and fast and able to run rings around your enemy. As opposed to static ranged troops that fire arrows at regular intervals, KHERGIT horse archers seem to randomly combine shooting, melee, and ramming. Unfortunately though, when they do decide to ram or go into melee, this will often result in their own death. As we said before, they're not the strongest when it comes to melee, especially the KHERGIT veteran horse archers, but when it comes to shooting from afar, these guys are deadly. To make the most of their speed and long range attack ability, move around infantry formations with your horse archers following you, trying to attack your enemies from behind. You can use different tactics like the Canterbury circle in order to completely confuse the enemy and rain down arrows while they can't touch you back. Every KHERGIT veteran horse archer though is guaranteed a small round cavalry shield, and some of them even spawn with an elite cavalry shield. These shields are very small and block very few ranged attacks, especially since the troop has a low shield skill though. They're not very good for melee fighting either, but they are a nice backup for when they go into melee, but as I said, melee should be a last resort for these guys. Overall for the KHERGITs, you probably want a good mix between veteran horse archers and lancers for those ranged combats, and then getting in for the melee. Probably putting your veteran horse archers at the back, putting them on a hill, firing down arrows, then getting your lancers to charge you the front line. Now once the enemy has been broken by the lancers' charge, then you can get your veteran horse archers to follow you. As your lancers are in the melee, get your veteran horse archers to follow you as you run rings around the whole battlefield, and as they're running, they will fire their arrows, picking off the ones that get broken off from the line, the ones that don't have their shields up. This is the best way to use the KHERGITs, and they will absolutely devastate people on the open plains. When it comes to sieging, they are less effective. When defending, you want to dismount, which happens automatically a lot of the time. Putting your veteran horse archers on the wall is a great way to shoot down, but when it gets into melee, these guys are pretty weak unless you have lancers at the front. And when you're actually sieging, I would say it's best not to use KHERGITs to siege, honestly. It's like having a little puppy going up against a lion. The KHERGITs aren't great when they're attacking sieges. But thank you so much for watching. This was the last of the native factions for Mount & Blade, but some people said they wanted me to do this with mods, so I think I'm going to go on some of the Game of Thrones mods and go through the factions on that for this series. But thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. But until then, I will see you in the next one.